I'm going to talk about dynamic tracing of your website. So we're going to show what's cool with OpenSolaris. That's, we take the power of DTrace within OpenSolaris and move it to, abstract components within MySQL, PHP, or Apache, and make it for, a PHP programmer or a MySQL programmer can get all the skills that he needs to find information underneath. So far, a system engineer who knows a lot about MySQL kernel or my OpenSolaris internals can very well get the information of MySQL or PHP, by writing some scripts on what happens underneath. But it was very hard for an average PHP programmer to do so. So this is an effort towards that extent. We want to say a PHP programmer to be able to use OpenSolaris and say, hey, how much long this particular script is taking? Or a MySQL programmer to use OpenSolaris and say, hey, how long this particular query is doing? What can I do to optimize this particular query? Or how is there a query hash cache is being invoked? That kind of cool information should be made possible. Okay, so for someone not familiar with DTrace, okay, so DTrace provides you yet another tool to ask questions about your kernel, right? Or what's happening underneath. The cool thing other thing about DTrace is it has the ability to write some scripts, so you can provide some logic into it, ask him to tell you questions at this particular event, that kind of things. Other than that, it's nothing other special other than any other tools like a SAR or MP-stat or a CPU stat. It's another tool to give you information, but with the more scripting technologies and the ability to fire at a particular event gives you an extra ability to get some information at a particular given context. Okay, so how does it work? The way it starts is, the OpenSolaris 10 especially, and since then OpenSolaris has added thousands of probes into the kernel, right? So when a particular kernel starts, and when you fire a particular probe and say, hey, I want information whenever a system writes something into the database, or writes something into the data, or whenever a network operation happens. So these particular probes do get fired at a particular event and give you information of what happened at that particular context. And these are nothing but instrumentation points that gets invoked as a trap event within the kernel and gives you context and gives you more information of any given probe that you're interested in. Okay, so here is a sample DTrace script. So it's pretty simple. Anyone familiar with Linux or Unix would understand what the first line says. It tells you, hey, what's the command that I need to run? And here is this pretty similar syntax. I mean, it's no different from any C program or any PHP program for that matter. It has a simple syntax which says here is the module, it's a provider, followed by a module and then a function, and the last is the probe name. So if you don't know anything, you can just say colon and move on, and it will fire you at that particular probe name that you have provided. Here the probe name is actually entry, and you want saying I'm interested anytime a system call is being invoked. This is what it says, and you are saying, and collect me an array of this information and tell me at the end. So you press Control-C and it gives you all the calls, all the processes that actually calls system call in. So it's a pretty cool way to get this information. So if you look at this previous ones, the syntax was, the first one is the provider name, and the next one is a module, and this particular syscall that I just showed you didn't have a module, or I wasn't interested, so I just skipped by saying a colon, empty colon there, and then followed by the next one is the function name. So again, if I'm not interested, I would just say an empty colon, and the probe that I was interested in was the entry. So I could very well collect or calculate the time by saying how long does each system call takes it. So you can fire a probe saying at the entry of a system call and at the exit of a system call. So this tells you, or you can calculate the time taken for every system calls. So that's a basics, right? Okay, so I mean, for an average programmer who is not very familiar with the DTrace syntax, I mean, you don't have to do out of the way. There are a lot of sample scripts available. The user demo scripts has a whole bunch of sample stems, and OpenSolaris folks have also put together a DTrace toolkit that helps you to build on. It's more task specific information in there. You can build on those tasks that you're interested in. So it has scripts for your PHP, MySQL, or also as part of your Ruby and that kind of stuff. Or if you're just interested in CPU particular things, there are sample scripts in that as part of the DTrace toolkits. You will you can use them and to build on it. Okay, so if you're a MySQL, especially they have a great documentation on their MySQL website. It's with samples and with more syntax of how to use it, and along with their documentation. So you can start from there. So more specifically, I mean, I'm going to talk about what's there for if you're an AMP stack guy. If you're running your website on either Apache, PHP, or MySQL, what's there for you, right? So far, as part of the Solaris kernel, you get all these dynamic probes as default for you. So you don't have to do anything. All these probes are made available. You can say dtrace -L. It tells you all the probes that are available. You write some few line scripts, you get some information there. Now, without static probes, or by adding a static probe in each of these engines, either it's an Apache or PHP or MySQL, I'm making it easier to say, hey, I just want to say how long a query takes, and I want to give a simple parameter, right? No complicated stuff. So that is made possible with OpenSolaris, and so on Solaris 10 too. So the way we do this is add something called static probes. These are probes that are compiled into each of these engines, Apache, MySQL, PHP. And these probes get fired when somebody invokes them. If nobody calls them, there is no any performance hit on it. But it also, that is, if somebody invokes them, and how frequently they are invoked, there will be some performance drop. So we recommend people invoking these probes on a conditional basis so that it gets fired only when you need this information. So start with, here is a MySQL script. Can you see this? Okay. So what it says here is a simple script which starts with, it should fire whenever a particular query is starting. And here are the arguments that I want to get it in. So the copy in str followed by an arg0 is the way you copy a particular argument into one of the dtrace script variable. I store a variable from a probe argument that's given to me, and use that argument to make some syntax out of it, or some logic out of it. So I'm interested in this sample script that I showed here. I'm interested in knowing how long a dtrace query, MySQL query is happening, or whether it's a particular query is going through a cache or not, or what can I do for a particular query. So it gets fired whenever a query start happens, and it gets fired again whenever a query is done. So I'm able to calculate the time taken for a given query. I can also find out if a particular MySQL query is going through the query cache. So here is a sample output that you would get if you run this particular script. It tells me here that this is a query that I ran. Here is the, it went through the query cache or not, and here is what the time taken. It's pretty handy to get these informations in your production environment or in your development without knowing too much or having very complicated tools. Right now, there aren't any easy tools available on other platforms to get you this information. So building on it, so here are the list of the probes that are available within MySQL. If you look at the list, they are pretty comprehensive, you might notice. There is probes starting from a connection start to a query start, and how long it's, or if you want to do just in an insert statement or a select update statements, you can get this information to get you, how long this particular statement is taking, that kind of information. And for each of these scripts, there are extensive examples within the MySQL documentation. I'll provide you a link to it at the end. So moving on, so here is what you can do with PHP is something similar you can do with your PHP scripts too. So PHP, here is another example. So what I'm interested in here is how long, as most of you might know, PHP is a run dynamic script language. So every time you execute this particular PHP script, it has to get compiled, and then it gets executed. So here is a script. I'm interested in knowing how long a particular script is taking to get compiled. So here is how you would do it pretty much. You would say, fire me a probe at the start of a compilation, and fire me a probe at the end of the compilation, and you can pretty much get the time taken for it. So we are building up on this. Here are the other probes that we have for PHP. We say, you can get PHP information whenever a request starts, or whenever a particular function executes, or whenever every line in the PHP executes. It depends upon what you're interested in. You can get that particular information. Again, please remember that the more the probe is fires, the more the performance drop will be. So you might want to fire your probes. There are conditional cases. For example, here I'm saying I want to fire a probe. Only the next statement here is where I can specify conditions, where you can say. So here I'm saying, give me a file, compile me a file. So here you could say arg0 is the name of the file. Here I can say compile this file only for this particular, a Drupal module script or something. So I'm not interested in the compilation of the entire website. I'm interested in only in files that are done by the Drupal, for example. So that helps you to narrow down your probe fires. So here are the other list of the probes we have. It starts from the request begin, request follow through to a compilation process, or whenever a function executes or moving on that. So what's next in PHP? I mean, we are more interested in adding more probes in PHP. We want to say, how long the particular GC events happen, or how long a particular session cleanup work is happening, or whenever an object is created, how long it's there. We want to add more information. We are working with the PHP community towards that. So we don't have a rich documentation the way we have with MySQL, so we are working on it. This is part of the project in WebStack project in OpenSolaris, so we would like to add more documentation, and any of your feedback is more than welcome. So Apache is still, we got this one free by a community, by someone in the prefetch community, did this project as an extension. So you can get a lot of information of Apache, how it works. But we haven't, as a part of the WebStack project, we haven't added it within the Apache core. So compared to MySQL or PHP or Ruby, all these probes are part of the engine now. I mean, we have we have worked with the community, added these probes. So you can either compile yourself and get these. So we haven't done that yet for Apache, so that's something, a work in progress. Hopefully in the next 6 months or so, we can expect that to happen. So right now, if you look at it, these probes require you knowledge about a system level programming to copy the pointers and get the information. It is still possible. There are sample scripts available which do that for you. Hopefully, going forward, we expect it to make it as simple as how you would do it with your PHP or MySQL. Okay, so if you're interested and if you like what we just talked, here are the different ways to try it out. OpenSolaris, the latest CDs, does have all these probes by default. The WebStack project also backports these features into Solaris 10. So enterprise customers who are interested in Solaris 10 can get these features. So or if you're just interested in any of just compiling yourself, so Apache probes are available at the prefetch.net website, along with some sample scripts on how to use them. It gives you quite a bit of internal information. For MySQL and PHP, these probes, initial set of probes are already available in the main trunk. So if you just copy the latest source, you will be able to compile and build it on your own. So for PHP 5.2 or 5.3, we haven't backported that yet. It's part of the WebStack project is what we are working on it. And if you're just interested, new to DTrace, and here are some ways to get this DTrace, I can provide you slide handouts. So you can take it out, take this thing that you can refer upon. So the DTrace toolkit is pretty handy. It has a lot of sample scripts that you can work on. Okay. Finally, what I do is part of the WebStack project in OpenSolaris. I mainly work on PHP engine and optimizing PHP and adding more DTrace probes. I work with MySQL folks, and going forward, we hope to do the same for Apache too. Cool. So here are some demos that I had. I don't know if you can see it clearly, or should we keep it a little lower? How do you guys would like? So just shows you some demos. Let's see if we can see it. The time taken in PHP and what's the time taken in MySQL. Here is a quick way to do this. What I'm doing here is capturing the processes of various applications like MySQL or HTTP, and then taking the time taken and then working on it. So these are some of the examples that you could use this information for. Similarly, if you're interested in Drupal, there are other things that I found it interesting is find out the syntax of how the code flow does is through again some simple DTrace scripts that I worked with someone in the ISP engineering, and this is pretty handy. So this tells you again on information on what's happening under the. It tells me, gives you a basic syntax or the code flow of the entire Drupal module. So again, because you have the function names and you're able to get the function arguments, you can use more constructive logics in there. Say if you're interested in particular anonymous logins or you're in a particular module, you can get that information. Or if you're just interested in a particular query, you can tailor your MySQL queries, get that information. Hope you find this all useful. Thank you.
So are you seeing, I guess, any sort of effects of people using some of the DTracing probes through the web stack already? Are we sort of seeing external to, I guess, anyone who's using OpenSolaris or whatever, are you seeing sort of the effects of people using DTracing the upstream code for Drupal or PHP or Mysql?
Right, especially with the Drupal, I don't know if you guys worked with Angelo. He's part of the Sun guys. He works a lot with the Drupal, so we help them. We work with the Drupal community, and some people who run their websites, they use these features that we have just talked about, and they do benefit with the Drupal right now on OpenSolaris. Sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you say that?
Are those probes put back into the gate?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, PHP probes are part of the trunk. MySQL probes are part of the 5.4 and already.
Okay.
And
so are they in like build mode 17 and those probably there, right?
right, you don't have to build. Yes, yes, it's part of already integrated in there. Yes.
So what's the issue with the Apache stuff?
Apache yet?
It's available. Is it not
Well,
merged upstream or?
No, I mean, right now what you have with Apache is more like an extension, as in done by Sun folks, right? So the way to get information is not as simple as giving a file argument and getting that information. So the way to do it in Apache is a little complicated. You need to have some pointers. So what it gives you, the argument you get for any of the probes that we just talked about. So Apache provides you some probes as part of the extensions. If you notice, for other probes, we have patched the engine, so we are able to get a lot more information. So for MySQL or PHP or Ruby, we have worked with the community and patched the engine, so we are able to get information saying as a more really meaningful argument. I'm saying in PHP I can say, give me the request time taken for this particular URI. You don't have to know any pointers. The arguments are pretty straightforward. In Apache, we haven't been able to successfully work with the community yet. We are working on it. And so now the way you can get this is the probes are basically, you can say, fire me whenever an accept connection is made. Now what you would do is it gives you a pointer to that particular Apache structure. And you need to know the structure information of Apache and say, this is the fourth element I'm interested in. That's not easier enough for an average guy to know. If I'm an Apache site administrator, I don't have to know about the Apache structures. I'm just caring about, this particular URI is fired or not, or that kind of thing. So we haven't gone there yet, like the way we have gone with MySQL or PHP. So hopefully we hope to get there.
Right, so I guess it's a bit like DTracing a piece of kernel code. You actually need to know what the structure
right.
is for certain.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So the Apache probes are not there?
Yes, for Apache we have DTrace probes, but they are not very easy to use because they are not patched into the engine. So the arguments requires you, as I mentioned here, it gives you a pointer to an Apache structure. That means you must be an Apache guru to understand what this structure is. But fortunately, the guys who gave this extension also gave some sample scripts as part of the prefetch.net. So you can build on these scripts. It gives you a good idea what it tells you, how many particular users are using it or how much time is being taken on a money module. It's pretty handy right now. But what we would like to do is something along the lines of PHP or MySQL. An average user just says, how long this Apache URI is taking processing it. That would be pretty handy, useful information to get. So we are working with the community. Hopefully the next version of OpenSolaris will have that one.
Apache would basically have to create specific functionality in Apache to actually.
Right. We have to patch the engine and.
Some of that data actually into a sort of generic form.
Yes. So what we'd like to do is get Apache Probes to look something like this, where I'm not sure if you can hear see from the back. The arguments are more readable here, right? I'm saying give me a query for this particular database. I can do on MySQL right now. I would like to do something similar for Apache, where I say, give me the time taken for this particular URI. I'm not interested in anything else. I don't need to know the structures or something like that. So we are not there yet. But right now, because of a sample script, it's a complex Perl script that the prefetch guys wrote. You can use that information right now, but it's not easier for anyone to construct it.
How about the Java stuff, the Jakarta, Tomcat?
Right. JVM 6 has extensive DTrace probes, way more than MySQL or PHP, because it's part of Sun, and Sun guys have done an enormously nice job. So, right, JVM provides you extensive probes on what you can do with Java. So with MySQL and PHP, because it's an outside open source community, we need somebody working with them. We need to understand their engineering. So that's part of the WebStack project. We deliver this, optimize for Solaris, also work with these communities, give them patches, make them go through with their processes, patch with these. So it took us quite a bit of work to patch the PHP within open source PHP community. Fortunately, MySQL was part of Sun, so it was a lot easier. So, okay.
Does that mean that you'll have to patch those probes again in future versions?
No, now that it is.
Are those changes put upstream?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. In PHP, it's already upstream. In MySQL, it's also upstream. So we don't have to work too hard. So we can now build on what we have on the PHP trunk. Similarly, MySQL guys are continuously evolving it for the 5.4 release. So yes, we want to do something similar for Apache, but we are not there yet. Hopefully, it will happen next 6 to 8 months. So. Cool.
2010 or 2.
Hope so. Okay, guys. Thanks for attending to this.